You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so congratulations-ish to West Virginia for being mentioned as one of the potential the top spots for the SEC in the next round of realignment. My thing here is, I think West Virginia fans do fit very well in the Big 12, right? I think they like being in the Big 12. I think they're appreciative that the Big 12 welcomed them in, and they seem to be that kind of university, that kind of fan base that does value loyalty, especially with everything they went through in the Big East. So I feel kind of comfortable, but that SEC paycheck, it's hard to pass up. It is what it is. So my counteraction, I guess, would be Brett Yormark. I hope that he watched the Drake and Cam stuff. I hope he's seen some of this start to permeate out at least a little bit, because if you want to prevent this from happening, to me, you got to kill the ACC. You got to go give them traveling partners. Go get a Miami, a Pitt, a Virginia Tech. Give West Virginia a bigger incentive to not look at this, because Drake and Cam did mention they're the ninth. What was it? Was it a marketability, profitability? So they were top 10 and something. And then they were top 15 and, it was wins. So they were number 9 in size of fan base. They were top 15 all time in college football and most wins, which I didn't know. So and you mentioned earlier, there was some other things. So what else have you heard about this potentially being a thing for West Virginia?
Some of those all-time stats I would say are they've been around a long time too, right?
They're
not quite Rutgers, but they've been around a long. West Virginia's other big thing for them, though, is they're the only big program in another state. It's not a very big state, but it's another state.
Okay.
And then while regionality, I guess they do share some with Virginia Tech or Ohio State, they do kind of have a different vibe in those regions, right? Like they just are. Yeah. And for reference, Mountaineer Paul is a great member of the team, but also a very look at Mountaineer Paul and then go check out Locked On Buckeyes and okay, that's the difference we're talking about here, right?
Yeah. Burning couches in the Big 12 is perfect, right? That's perfect.
Welcome to the show.
Yes.
And I think the big thing there, though, is the SEC has its own network, and we can blame those folks in Austin for why the Big 12 doesn't, but that's a whole different episode of the podcast.
Yep.
With their own network, the SEC network, they are in the game of adding states, because then they can sell that TV package to the state. Okay. And then you're paying for it every month, no matter whether you're watching or not, right? And you got to watch to get West Virginia content if you're in West Virginia. It's the same reason that Sankey mentioned he wanted to add North Carolina, was because they want to add another state. Well, they chose UNC as the one potentially. I guess that's that whole story, right? But Florida State and Clemson are national enough that I think that there is conversation with those that's valid. West Virginia is odd to me because it is not a very big state as far as carrying it. That's why you talk about the region a little bit and kind of the cultural aspects of West Virginia as well. I do. And then I should say that this all stems from one of those Twitter accounts that has been right a couple times. So everyone thinks that they must know something. Gotcha. Tweeted out that apparently West Virginia has had conversations about it with SEC officials. And the conversation, I guess, stemmed from back when in 2011, when West Virginia came to the Big 12, they were getting a laundry list of reasons that the SEC said no, and they've addressed those reasons. They've fixed this facility, done this, they've done those things, and hey, let's open this conversation again. Everyone's gonna be jumping around in 2030 again, right? And so that, I think, is where a lot of it comes from. I will say, and I'm not sure what you think about this, I almost wonder if, in a realignment perspective, if they're kind of pushing chips to the table because Yormark kind of needs them in a weird way. They're the Eastern Seaboard linchpin to me to getting Pitt, Louisville, Virginia Tech, and your pitch to them, to those schools, to leave the ACC and join the Big 12, it does feel like, hey, look, we're already in your time zone, right? I guess Central Florida is also in the time zone, but West Virginia carries an interesting weight there, and I wonder if they're just trying to get people to bid on them a little bit in a way or something. But I don't really see them as an SEC school. Do you?
No, I don't. And I think you kind of nailed it, right? Mountaineer Paul is, an embodiment of, by and large, how the West Virginia fan base is. And when they're good, Morgantown at night is very comparable, in my opinion, to Lubbock. When Texas Tech is good, if it's a night game and they're ranked, it's probably a loss. Like it really doesn't matter who you are.
Hard to win.
Texas
Hard
went
places
through it.
to win.
OU went through it. We've gone through it. If Tech is good and they're ranked and it's a night game, you're going to take a loss while getting hit in the back of the neck with batteries, tortillas, and tacos and everything else that you can think of. So West Virginia does fit in the conference very well. I think their fan base would agree with that. But in this wide, wacky world that is college football now, the fans, unfortunately, don't get a ton of say in this, right? So if the administration, the powers that be, the donors, if they decide that we have to take this SEC payday, then, yeah, we could be looking at a potential problem. And I do find your argument very viable. If you are Brett Yormark, if you're ever going to look to expand and take part of the ACC, or maybe in the more legitimate part of the ACC, you do have to present West Virginia as one of the reasons, one of the options. And I think that goes both ways, right? Whenever you're trying to attract talent, you can use West Virginia as a sales pitch. And whenever you're trying to sales pitch West Virginia on why they should stay, if we're telling them, hey, we're about to have Pitt or a Va Tech or a Miami or a Louisville, we're going to give you some more geographical partners to travel with to make life easier on you. That is the only thing that kind of alienates West Virginia. And that might be the only reason they would explore leaving, is because outside of Cincy and UCF, they don't really have any help. So they're spending more than everybody else in the conference on travel. And I think Brett Yormark needs to step up to the plate here and do something major. Did you kill the Pac-12, Brett? Kill the ACC because they're dying anyways.
Travel is largely a non-revenue sports thing, which isn't – I actually like non-revenue – I like track and field a lot. My real thing for that is that really hits those pocketbooks more, though, because those sports aren't bringing in a lot of money, right?
Right.
I also think that a criminal thing that happened to West Virginia – that actually you and your fan base might relate to is splitting up Pitt, West Virginia was atrocious. They should have gone to whatever conference it was together. Yep. That should have never happened like that. Yep. If you were taking one, you should take. And just like when Oklahoma and Oklahoma State split up and suddenly Bedlam was broken, right? Like that should have never happened. And I say that more because I think Oklahoma should come back, but that's a separate episode, right? I think that breaking, and like West Virginia, I'm sure as their fan base has to be saying like, hey, there's some talk that Mountaineer Paul has had about like game day it has West Virginia Pitt on the like short list of games for this year. Like they can hype that up as well. I feel like they're going to be looking to get with their buddies in the next realignment, and that could be Pitt and Louisville, and that could be Virginia Tech. That'd be someone close by in a way that the Big 12 does need to pay attention to. I don't think it's an SEC school, but I do think it's an interesting conversation. I don't think it's impossible either.
See, I hadn't necessarily thought of it from that angle. That's why you're the expert. I'm just the goofy dude that screams into a microphone. But yeah, one of the very, very few things that I've always been somewhat critical on Brett Yormark about is the lack of rivalries, right? Yes, you lose Bedlam, so you lose Red River. You do gain the Holy War, but then the next biggest rivalry we have is Farmageddon. And for whatever disastrous decision reason, they're not going to play every year. So you have the Holy War, you have Farmageddon, and then you have what? I know TCU and Baylor pretend to have a rivalry to some degree, which I don't necessarily understand that either, other than the religious angle of both universities. But outside of that, like we don't have that stuff. We don't have a premier game to put on rivalry weekend other than the Holy War. And we all know that rivalries do, in fact, drive some viewership, right? And viewership is profit. Profit is expansion. It gives you much more capabilities. And we haven't capitalized, whether it's going to be Oklahoma State versus Tech as a budding rivalry, or Kansas State versus whomever else, or Houston versus Texas Tech. There's other rivalries in the conference that we're not promoting enough. Like if Oklahoma State Utah is ever going to be a rival, you need to make it a yearly game. Same with Oklahoma State Texas or Houston Texas Tech. And we're not doing that. I hate that. So in order to combat that, that would be a beautiful idea. Bring the backyard brawl into the Big 12, give that extra incentive for West Virginia to continue to be happy. And I think everybody wins. And that allows the SEC to lose to some degree because they're going to do what they are going to do. And that's fine. I think Brett Yormark has been the visionary that we needed in this conference to be successful. But there has been some things that he's recommended the Big 12 do that he ended up not doing. And then the other conference just kind of stole his idea. And that I don't necessarily appreciate. Brett Yormark needs to have another capitalization moment. I think this is it. Do not give West Virginia a reason to even entertain the idea of leaving the conference. If you go get the Pitts and the Virginia Techs and Miamis of the world, I do think that will allow all West Virginia country to breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, we're where we're supposed to be, and we're going to be here for quite some time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the biggest thing there is locking them down, because then you can kill the ACC and make it a real power 3. And suddenly you're playing, it's a little bit different game because you'd have probably more schools in the Big 12 than the SEC and Big 10, but it becomes a lot different race all of a sudden. I don't see West Virginia going to the SEC, but I do think it's opened up an interesting conversation about it, because I don't hate the idea of the SEC getting a new, like, if I'm an SEC person, adding states, taking shots out of their conferences, like that all tracks and makes sense.
Well, and another thing Drake and Kim mentioned that I wasn't aware of, they have like a top 20, maybe even top 15 audience. Like they have like 2 million something fans. I didn't know that. I had no idea.
I wonder what, I mean, obviously they're very passionate. You can tell that when you mention like going to Morgantown for a game, but I'm trying to figure out where exactly, because again, it's not a very big state.
Right.
I know they got alumni of their states just like everyone does, but it was an interesting thing that I hadn't really thought of. And then when they said, like, I go, no way. And they're Googleably right. Right. Like that tracks. And so I was a little surprised, but
yeah, they have a lot of things going in their favor, and I think it is collectively good for the Big 12 to have some of this parity. Now, eventually, right, at some point in time in the next 6-7 years, I think there does need to be a flag bearer, right? But in the interim, the fact that number 16 can beat number 1, number 2 can be 15, and on any given weekend, which is actually ironic. Have you seen that Any Given Saturday SEC thing on Netflix?
No.
I mean, in the transfer portal era, it's kind of cool, right? So I saw J.K. Johnson, who's now at Oklahoma State. He's in the show. Wendell Gregory from South Carolina is now. So seeing some of the SEC guys that have transferred into Stillwater from that angle, it is kind of cool. But, dude, in the first few minutes, they begin this thing with Any Given Saturday in the SEC. Anybody can beat anybody and anything can happen. I was like, what? That is absolutely preposterous. When is anybody ever talking about Mississippi State knocking off Georgia, or even Ole Miss, consistently beating somebody like in Alabama? It doesn't happen. Like, the only time in recent memory I can think of that the David versus Goliath thing actually came to fruition was Vandy beating Alabama this previous season. But outside of that, it is very, very, very rare that any team from the bottom half of the SEC is even in a competitive ball game with the top 4 SEC teams. It's a ridiculous notion to pretend that the SEC is this league where every Saturday anybody can beat anybody. I was like, when did Netflix get involved in this SEC propaganda? Yeah, I almost said a bad word. See, Parker,
but I know that you'll feel the same way about Austin as I do. To me, though, if anyone could beat anyone over there, UT and Oklahoma wouldn't have gone. Like, part of the thought process was like, let's go find some of these Mississippi States, the Kentuckys. Like, let's go find some of those dogs. And from
a scheduling perspective, it's very visible that the SEC is like, you know what, we're going to help someone and screw someone. Let's help the Horns. And honestly, I never thought there would be a day in my life that I said I kind of felt bad for OU, but that draw from a scheduling perspective, like you mentioned OU coming back to the conference, I would love it. I would absolutely love it, partially because we won 2 of the last 3, also because we're absolutely bending them over the coals right now and then treating them like a redheaded stepchild when it comes to in-state recruiting. But realistically speaking, man, there are tons of things I could say about Austin and UT, but none of which are appropriate for me to keep my job. So I'm going to refrain from that. Anywho, man, this has been a blast. Thank you very, very much for coming on and helping us kind of break down some of the nuances between the old school Houston teams that a lot of people are familiar with and assuming still exist. From that area, I hope both of our teams have a big season. Again, the parity is what we can sell right now. So if you have 2 teams that are projected 12, 13, 14, 15-ish range in the preseason polls, to have these 2 teams finish up towards the top would be great. To see Jason Casel-Brooks and Boogie do some miraculous things, also going to be great. So if you're coming to Stillwater for the Houston game, make sure you hit me up and we'll find a way to make some fun out of the deal. But anywho, Everybody go check out Locked On Cougs because Parker is the consummate professional while I'm just the goofy dude who yells in front of a microphone. But make sure that while we're at it, hit that subscribe button so Drake can keep his job. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen on both of these channels. All right, y'all. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. Oh, and go ahead and hit the like button if you liked it because that's manageable as well. All right, y'all. Go Cowboys. Go Cougs. We'll be locking them up here pretty soon. All right, buddy.